Good morning, everyone. I am Maranjo T. Jorge, and I am the first reporter. I am going to tackle about the Filipino-American relations. So, the United States established diplomatic relations with the Philippines in 1946. The U.S.-Philippine relations are based on strong historical and cultural linkages and a shared commitment to democracy and human rights. The 1951 U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty provides a strong foundation of our robust post-World War II security partnership. The Philippines is the oldest security ally of the U.S. in Southeast Asia and one of the 5 treaty allies of the U.S. and the Pacific region. In order to make the alliance responsive to the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century, the Philippines and the United States signed the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or the EDCA. The agreement supports the AFP's modernization efforts and promotes interoperability between Philippines and U.S. and forces. It will also help maintain and develop Philippine maritime security, maritime domain awareness, and humanitarian assistance and disaster relief capabilities. The U.S.-Philippine Bilateral Strategic Dialogue, or the BSD, is the annual forum for forward planning across the spectrum of our relationship. Strong people-to-people ties and economic cooperation provide additional avenues to engage on a range of bilateral, regional, and global issues. In 2013, the United States accounts for 12.53% of the total trade of the country, ranking as the second largest trading partner of the Philippines.
My name is Shani Sumungay. Philippine-U.S. security relation because of the following. The U.S. and the Philippines have a particular relationship. The U.S. is home to more than 2 million Filipinos and Filipinos-Americans, making it one of the Philippines' best financial partners and providers of development assistance. This unique partnership has its roots in the Spanish-American War, when Americans and Filipinos fought alongside one another to liberate the Philippines from Spanish rule. According to the condition of the Treaty of Paris, the Philippines was given up to the U.S. when Spain was defeated. After the Philippine Senate dissolved the MBA in 1991, there was decline in Philippine-American relations and coincided with a period of U.S. military proximity when the U.S. and the Philippines confirmed the visiting force agreement in 1999. It suggested that security ties between the two countries had improved. The Philippine-U.S. security relationship really faced significant challenges in various openings, with later improvements such as the re-election of President George Bush and the assignment of the Philippines as the base of the Anti-Terrorism Task Force during the November 2004 Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference.
Post-war environment of Filipino and American relations. So this post-war environment is about the end of Cold War between the Philippines and America, in which the Philippines achieved its independence towards the contrary nation. So let's start with the Philippine-U.S. security relations. This relation started to melt out when the U.S. bases here in the Philippines was being pulled out despite the presence of the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. By the end of the 1947 Philippine-U.S. Military Bases Agreement, it came at the time that the U.S. and all other remaining countries in the world are accustomed or aligned with the post-Soviet period. At the end of Cold War of 1947 MBA, they saw new patterns and dangers to security that requires less military power. With this, there are developing contemporary dangers that is taking place in the Philippines at that time, which are outskirt, which is outside boundary regional debate, wrongdoings of transnational or extending or operating across national borders, territorial administration, fear mongering or arousing the fear of the public. Despite all of these contemporary dangers, the United States not see much to organize their powers or return their bases here in the Philippines. But that changed when the China challenge arose. So the China's taking occupation of debated islands in the South China Sea and its revealed arms, modernization, and military development concerned the Philippines and the United States, and that made them realize that it is important to return their security relations.
What is the VFA? The two countries signed the VFA in 1998. The point of interest in the re-established Philippine-US relation amid the post-Cold War period was the approval by the Philippine Senate in 1999 of the Republic of the Philippine-United States Visiting Forces Agreement. With this understanding, military activities between the Philippines and the US were conducted with greater regularity and efficiency. The VFA enabled these activities to take place so that strategic defense objectives could be met. The VFA is an agreement that gave the United States legal protection for its military in the Philippines. After a number of reactions, advocates of this agreement focused on the major and indisputable structure of the VFA. Every military exercise to be led in the Philippines and any exercises of U.S. barrier and military workforce in the nation are constantly subject to previous endorsement from the Philippine government. The Philippine government will not allow any visit by U.S. troops in whatever shape or frame directed in disparagement of Philippines' way. Likewise, contrary to many fault-finders' impression, the VFA does not constitute perpetual positioning of U.S. powers in the Philippines. Rather, it is simply brief visits by U.S. troops. The two nations regard the concept to be critical in managing the soul of the Philippine-US exceptional relations, for the Philippines' exertion will be given to reconstructing respective relations with the US in the political security field, to create a political domain helpful for nearer safeguard collaboration. Such exertion would profit the Philippines to support its outer protection post, as well as to add local security and steadiness.
Good morning, everyone. Today I am going to report or tackle about the Mutual Logistics Support Agreement. So in November 2002, the Philippines and the US marked the Mutual Logistics Support Agreement as a complementary strategic help between the military powers of the two nations for the term and affirmed actions. For example, joint activities and preparing tasks and different organizations, like the assumptions of the US with 56 different nations. The MLSE plans to bring down the cost of security collaboration by limiting authoritative expenses and wastage. Likewise, the alternate assumptions between the Philippines and the US, the MLSA additionally turned into the focal point of examination of patriot commentators, contending about the excessively careful way that the agreement was produced, and the fundamental substance of the agreement that may convey genuine national security suggestions. A standout amongst the most vocal commentators of MLSA was the previous Philippine senator and constitution expert Jovito Salonga, who opined that not one or the other, the U.S. Embassy or the Malacanang, can usurp the right of the Senate by expressing the MLSA as an official understanding, and in this way needs Senate endorsement or simultaneously. And according at the point of Philippine Foreign Affairs Secretary Blas Ope brought up that the MLSA would only encourage the execution of the existing understanding and does not include changes in national approach. It makes modification of detail in complementing our set of national approach as reflected in the standards contained in our settlement commitments. OPLE also included that MLSA does not contain a legitimate commitment to concede coordinations fostered, yet rather than instance of best invaders' commitment to do as such. However, in the midst of feedback, the MLSA, which conjoined the two nations, are fundamental assertions overseeing the Philippines-U.S. security relations. The 1955 MDT and the 1999 VFA was actualized, additionally maintaining and reinforcing revived RPUS strategic alliance. With this, are we really free? Are we really free from the foreigner or not?
So let's proceed to the Philippine-US alliance and the global war terrorism. Week of new dangers at 1990. Reassessment by the United States of its respective organizations together with East and Southeast Asian countries, and there were difficulties in the local security condition. Oppressor assaults on September 11, 2001. There was a desperation of producing participation with nations in the area surfaced. The Al-Qaeda organized designer of the slippery assaults apparently kept up joints with other global psychological oppressor bunches situated in Southeast Asia. President Arroyo offered the utilization. This utilization of United States bases in the nation as travel focus for the worldwide coalition battling in Afghanistan. She immediately declared a foreign column way to deal with battle fear mongering. The Philippines' battle fear mongering and transparently bolstered the US GWOT. The Philippine government shared trade of data with Malaysia and Indonesia and maintained its long-standing association with United States. After the 9/11 occurrence, the Philippine government was the primary Asian state to proclaim full help to the worldwide coalition against psychological warfare drove by the United States of America. Lastly, commitment to worldwide steadiness. President Bush assigned the Philippines as a noteworthy non-NATO partner, joining the rundown of nations.
Now, I am going to tackle about Balikatan 2002 exercises. Balikatan is an annual event aimed at improving Republic of the Philippines, United States, combined planning, combat readiness, and interoperability, while enhancing security relations and demonstrating United States resolve to support the Republic of the Philippines against external aggression. Balikatan is conducted to meet Republic of the Philippines' U.S. obligations under the Mutual Defense Treaty and to fulfill RPUS mutual training and readiness requirements. The Philippine Constitution does not allow long-term basing by another country in the Philippines. The last of the U.S. military bases at Subic and Clark were closed in the early 1990s. The Philippine and U.S. heightened their push to improve their security organization. The U.S. again observed the significance of improving the capacities and joint interoperability of the Philippine power to accomplish effects on counter psychological oppression in divorce. Reciprocal military activities were to be the essential apparatus by which this target would be accomplished. In 1995, the Philippines ended Balikatan because of a dispute over the Visiting Forces Agreement. That agreement gave the United States jurisdiction over crimes committed by military personnel while on duty in a foreign country. It was reinstated in May 1999 in spite of protests from the Catholic Church and over anti-US elements in the Philippines. The Visiting Forces Agreement provided for expanded military cooperation after coming into force in 1999. In late 2001, the United States planned to use the Balikatan 2002 exercise as a springboard for expanded counterterrorism cooperation with the Republic of the Philippines following the terrorist attacks on 11th day of September 2001. This cooperation, Operation Freedom Eagle, was initially intended to be combined with the counter-terrorism training portion of the exercise Balikatan 2002. Following the end of the exercise, the mission was made more permanent as part of Operation Enduring Freedom Philippines or the OEFP.
Hi, I am Juno Mercar Custodio and I will be doing a brief discussion about Counterterrorism Task Force. So the Counterterrorism Implementation Task Force or CTITF was established by the Secretary General in 2005 and endorsed by the General Assembly through the United Nations Global Counterterrorism Strategy by consensus in 2006. The mandate of the CTITF is to enhance coordination and coherence of counterterrorism efforts of the United Nations system. So the task force consists of 38 international entities which by virtue of their work have a stake in multilateral counterterrorism efforts. So the goal of the CTITF is to help member states implement the 4 pillars of the global strategy, which are steps to address the conditions that encourage the development of terrorism, measures to prevent and combat terrorism, and measures to optimize each entity's comparative advantage. As the cornerstone of the war on terrorism, policies that guarantee everyone's respect for human rights and the rule of law. Working groups and counterterrorism-related initiatives are how CTITF organizes its work in areas where collaboration across UN system players might benefit the strategy's implementation.
Now to continue, the pullout of our troops from Iraq made a huge impact in the Filipino-American relations as we are criticized in breaking up with the coalition. President Arroyo made sure that the rule for residential dependability must come first instead to global responsibility of the country. But later on, it had deflected the American criticism by emphasizing its general support for the global war on terror through diplomatic measures. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Counterterrorism Task Force, to be specific, are also known as the APEX CTTF. Now let's proceed to the Counterterrorism Action Plan. The CTAP is a useful tool that provides an opportunity for members in the economy to take stock of their efforts, to respond to leaders and ministers' directions, and to highlight capacity building needs to implement these commitments. The template is designed to be updated regularly by member economies. In 2008, the TAP template was streamlined and rationalized to strengthen it as a tool for identifying capacity-building needs, sharpening focus in APEX counterterrorism and secure trade agenda, and to better incorporate new commitments on counterterrorism. Now the question is, how does the Philippines deal with terrorism? The Philippines has not established such a mechanism specific for victims of terrorism. The Philippines does have some government programs which help victims of crimes in general, and victims of terrorism may fall under these. Furthermore, Executive Order Number 82 Series of 2012 established the National Crisis Management Committee, which is the highest policy and decision-making body in managing human-induced crisis at the national level. As part of its mandate, this committee has duties regarding post-action and assessment. However, there has been no specific program established for dealing with victims of terrorism under this mandate.
Present connections between the Philippines and the United States. Estados Unidos are bilateral relation between the United States of America and its previous settlement, which is the Republic of the Philippines. The connection between the United States and the Philippines has verifiably been solid and has been depicted as a special relationship. The former Philippine President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, however, is supportive of a foreign policy that is less dependent on the United States, favoring one that prioritizes closer relations with China and Russia. Although the Philippines and the US have a mutual defense treaty dating from 1951 and as of 2019 are actively working on implementation, concluded in 2014. The Philippines is one of the most seasoned Asian accomplices of the US and also a deliberately major non-NATO partner. The United States was consistently ranked as one of the Philippines' favorite nations in the world, with 90% of Filipinos viewing the US and 91% viewing Americans favorably in 2002, 90% of Filipinos viewing US influenced positively in 2011, 85% of Filipinos viewing the US and Americans favorably in 2013, and 92% of Filipinos viewing the US favorably in 2015, and 94% having confidence in the United States President Barack Obama, making the Philippines one of the most pro-American countries in the world. On October 20, 2016, the former President of the Philippines reported a partition from the United States, both militarily and monetarily, for cooperations with China and Russia.